Okay, I'm going to call this meeting of the Salt Lake City Human Rights Commission to order. This is Tuesday, August 1st at 5:37. We have 5 people in the room and currently nobody online. So go around and introduce ourselves and who we represent. That'll be guests as well. So I am Jason Wessel, I'm chair and I represent District 1.
Will Terry, I represent District 4.
David Lita, District 6.
Emily Silverman, I'm an at-large member.
And Maria Romero, Executive Assistant to the Chief Equity Officer.
Michelle Mooney, Equity Manager.
Jason Oldroyd with Salt Lake City Attorney's Office.
Nancy Cantor with the League of Women Voters.
I'm Jenny Mayer-Glenn, representing District 5.
All right, thank you. Next on our agenda, we are welcoming Jenny to her first meeting back at the Human Rights Commission. So if you'd like to tell us about yourself.
Sure, thanks. Let's see, just heads up, I was part of the Human Rights Commission from 2005 to 2011. During that time was when the non-discrimination ordinance was passed. So it was a really exciting time to be part of the commission. So that was a really great experience, and I guess that's why I decided to do it again. I'm not sure, but I am here. I am currently professionally the director of University Neighborhood Partners and special assistant to the president for campus community partnerships at the University of Utah. University Neighborhood Partners is a department of the U located in the west side of Salt Lake, and our role is to act as a convener for to prioritize community, to bring together partnerships around community priorities. So we bring together university resources, higher ed, it could be faculty, it could be research, it could be grants, whatever it is, along with community-based organizations and institutions, and then resident priorities and residents. So an example of that would be, a good example is we support an organization called Comunidad Materna in Utah. They're a Spanish language doula organization that has been sort of growing up through the Westside Leadership Institute, and she just got a $250,000 grant from U Health Plans and another $375,000 from WIC and $375,000. And so we're feeling like, yay! And so we're trying to work to support what community wants and needs, and always centering community. We also have a curriculum. We've been doing trainings with folks from the mayor's office, so the community engagement staff did a class with us. We have a curriculum that teaches how to build partnerships. Prior to that, so I've been doing that, this is my 5th year at UNP. Prior to that, I worked in the Salt Lake School District for 23 years as a teacher and school administrator, also district administrator in family school collaboration, community engagement. Have 2 kids that are grown and 2 granddaughters, and my husband just retired. And I am starting to count the days now, and looking forward to when we get to camp for a year.
Well, welcome. We have our retreat coming up later this month, so hopefully you'll be able to attend.
Yes,
we've got Council Member Wharton who's going to hopefully be able to attend and give us some background on the non-discrimination ordinance. With both of you there to celebrate one of the big success stories, that'd be great. Also trying to get a couple of people intimately involved with CDAW and some of the other things, just so that we could, because a lot of the members are fairly new to the commission, and with the institutional experience kind of going out the door in December, it'd be nice to have people that can talk about the successes and just all figure out what direction you're going to go in.
Great. And Commissioner Bacon entered the room.
All right, so I'll acknowledge that Commissioner Bacon is present online.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry about that. Someone came to my door. Otherwise, I would have been here on time.
No worries. Thanks for joining us, Everett.
Thank you.
Jason, can I also, sorry, Chair,
Yeah.
can I just also add quickly, I apologize. I haven't gotten my calendar aligned yet with the meetings, and so I do have to leave early tonight because we have tickets to a concert. And so I apologize for that. I would normally prioritize this, but I would.
Okay. So we will skip over item 2. We'll do that at the end. Well, actually, does somebody want to make a motion to adopt the June minutes?
I'll move to adopt the June minutes.
All right, is there a second? I'll second. Okay, we got a motion and a second. Do this by assent. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? I'm gonna rule that the motion passed. All right, so we've adopted the June 23rd minutes. So item 3 in our agenda, public comments. We have, you'd like to introduce yourself again, Nancy from League of
Yes,
Women
I'm
Voters?
Nancy Cantor. I'm here as an observer with the League of Women Voters. I'm fairly new to the League of Women Voters. But I retired 3.5 years ago after working as a psychologist at primary children's with children with mental problems.
Nancy, how do you spell your last name?
Cantor. Just like Eddie, people remember this. I had an uncle Eddie, but it wasn't the Eddie.
Excuse me, I'm having difficulty hearing Nancy.
Oh, we only have a couple of microphones out on the table. We'll try to make an effort to speak up, Everett.
Okay, thanks. Sorry about that.
We'll bring you a mic, Nancy.
Did you wish anything else? Or?
I didn't have anything else.
My background, my PhD is in Middle East history, so I recognize that Cantor is a traditional Jewish name. It's a traditional Jewish name. It's
Oh,
been
yes,
long.
yes, yes. Yes, I came here as a Jewish Gentile.
We have another person joined us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi there, my name is Andrew Villa. I'm just here to just kind of sit in. I don't know, listen. I just never sit into any of this, so.
All right, welcome to join us.
Andrew, how do you spell your last name?
Patilla.
Padilla.
We've convened the meeting, but we're generally we operate in informal debate, so anybody can speak up. We don't have time limits or anything, so if you wish to contribute, raise your hand and all of you. I doubt we'll have to call ourselves into formal debate, but if we do, then we'll give you instructions on how to do that. All right, so if there are no more public comments, that will take us to, we are going to go to item 5 on the agenda so that we can get the OPMA training before Commissioner Merrick Glenn has to leave. So I'll hand it off to Jason.
Sounds good. I may borrow the mic for a second, if that's all right. Can everyone hear me okay? So yes, my name is Jason Oldroyd. I'm at the Salt Lake City Attorney's Office. I'm here to do the open and public meetings training today. It's an annual requirement that we have an open and public meetings training opportunity. It's going to be relatively straightforward. I think most folks have it before. I will note, if you want any additional training, the state auditor's website has a video presentation you can sign up for there. It's probably about 15, 20 minutes and it's animated. It's a lot more interesting than I am. So feel free to do that as well if you're interested on the Utah State Auditor's website. So the basic principle for open and public meetings is that the committee meetings need to be open to the public unless there's an exception or available under the statute that would allow us to close the meetings. In this instance, we're talking about meetings where it's a convening of at least a quorum of the public body for the purposes of discussing, receiving comments, or acting upon something that falls inside the purview of the committee's responsibility. So with that, if you have a chance meeting or a social gathering, that's not going to be something that's subject to the Open Public Meetings Act. Also, with regard to that, the committee may hold electronic meetings subject to the Act. We're going to talk more about electronic meetings as we go through the process. Post-COVID, I think that's become something that's far more common and we're far more equipped and ready to do if we need to do that. So the convening of a meeting is a calling together of the quorum by a person that's authorized to do so. It's for the express purpose of discussing or acting upon the subject inside the committee's jurisdiction. In order to do that, typically we need to give notice of the meeting. And the notice requirement is that we have at least 24 hours public notice prior to the meeting. That notice needs to include an agenda, the date, the time, and the place of the meeting. And the notice needs to be posted at the principal office of the committee and on the Utah Public Notice website, and oftentimes if there is an actual committee website available, that's another place where we would generally post that notice as well. We also, if the committee has an annual schedule set up, the committee should give notice of its annual meeting schedules and specify the date, time, and place of those scheduled meetings during the year. So this notice requirement doesn't apply, however, if we have an emergency. And if there's a situation that generates an emergency meeting, we simply try to give the best notice possible under the circumstances. But an emergency meeting can't be held unless there is an attempt to notify all the members of the committee, and at least the majority of the members of the committee approve holding that emergency meeting. With regard to the agenda, we need a certain degree of specificity when we're providing the agenda and the notice provisions. And what we are shooting for is something that provides enough specificity that the public will be notified about the topics to be considered at the meeting, and each separate topic needs to be listed under an agenda item. Now, if there's something that comes up that is not on the meeting schedule or not on the agenda schedule, we can't take final action on those open meetings unless it's actually listed on the agenda and included in the advance public notices. If there's a member of the public that raises a topic of interest, then the chair has discretion to determine whether or not there's a discussion on that topic, but the committee can't actually take any action on that topic until there's been an opportunity for notice and a chance. With regard to just the principle of open meetings, a meeting under the Open and Public Meetings Act needs to be open unless it's closed, and that makes a lot of sense there. We're going to go into a little more details to exactly when we can close a meeting and what exactly that entails. And there are a few circumstances in which, when we're talking about open and public meetings, we're not just talking about standard meetings, but also if there's an executive session or something that may be a little bit different in nature, that also needs to be an open meeting. I don't know if this particular body does it, but we have some bodies that will do tours where they'll be checking the grounds out or going to various locations. And those also would need to be considered open unless one of these very specific reasons for closing the meeting comes into play. So let's talk just a little bit about what a closed meeting is and what it entails. So the reasons for which we can close a meeting are to discuss the character, professional competence, the physical or the mental health of an individual, strategy sessions to discuss collective bargaining, strategy sessions for reasonably imminent litigation, strategy sessions to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property. So either buying or selling property would be things that also could be the subject of a closed meeting. And then a few more discussion regarding the deployment of security personnel devices or systems or investigative proceedings regarding allegations of criminal misconduct. Then there also is one catch-all where we attorneys come into play. You can also close the meeting to receive legal advice from them. So those are the reasons for which we may close a meeting. And the process for doing that is we need to start with an open meeting. We need to have a quorum present, and 2/3 of those committee members present must vote to approve the closing of the meeting. The meeting has to be closed for one of the reasons that we just discussed, and we need to make an announcement regarding the reasons for closing the meeting, the location of the closed meeting, which almost always is going to be the exact same location where the open meeting has been taking place. And then the vote by name of each committee member, whether they were for or against closing. So typically the circumstances in which I've been in a closed meeting, we'll have the meeting going on. It will be listed on the agenda that there's a potential or possibility for a closed meeting. And when that item comes up, the committee members will take a vote and close the meeting. Anyone who's not eligible to participate in the closed meeting will be asked to leave the physical space, and we'll also take whatever steps we need to electronically to just kind of close that down. And then we can participate in the closed meeting. We typically do need to keep a record of the closed meeting. A recording of the closed meeting needs to be kept in almost all circumstances, and written minutes may be kept but don't need to be kept. And whatever records are kept of the closed meeting, those are considered protected records under Grant Law. So they're not something that could be accessed through a simple grant request. I have seen circumstances where if someone challenges the reason for the closed meeting, then the judge can take a look at those records and make a determination based upon those records whether or not the meeting is appropriately closed. There are a few reasons for which no records need to be kept are, if I can find that in. Okay. Yeah, so to not keep a record, or reasons for not keeping one, are to discuss the deployment of security measures with personnel or devices, or to discuss the character, professional competence, or health of the individual. So in those circumstances, we don't need to keep any record, and the chair or whoever is going to be in charge of that particular meeting would sign a written statement to the effect that that is what was being discussed. So those are our closed meetings. The recording that's kept of a meeting needs to be a complete and unedited record of all open portions of the entire meeting. It needs to be properly labeled and identified with the date, time, and place of the meeting. So when we're talking about meetings, what's the official record, the written minutes are actually considered to be the official record for any open meeting. The recording is kept for 3 years, the written minutes are kept forever. So with regard to the retention schedule, it's been fun. I've got a grandpa who's currently 103, who's an engineer. I've seen him on various old transcripts that went through it, so they do keep them forever. With regard to the approval of the minutes, within 3 days after the meeting is held, the committee needs to make the audio recording available. Pending minutes, which are minutes which have not been formally approved, need to be available to the public within a reasonable amount of time. And within 3 days of the approval of the minutes, like what we just did today, we would need to make the approved minutes available to the public. With regard to electronic meetings, we can't hold an electronic meeting unless there's been a resolution, rule, or ordinance adopted. I believe that is the case with this board, so I think we're able to hold the electronic meetings. We do need to establish an anchor location for the meeting, at least one of which is in the building where the committee normally meets. So if we were to hold electronic meetings, such as what we're doing right now, we designate the anchor location, which typically would be this particular spot. Just a few more things with regard to electronic messages. The Open Public Meetings Act does not restrict a committee member from transmitting an electronic message like an email or a text or something along those lines to the other committee members at the time when the committee is not convened. However, if you do send any text or communications to other committee members, those would be considered records and could be disclosed pursuant to grant request. So if you are going to be sending anything, just recognize that's something that would be available to the public through a grant request, and just be aware of what you're.
Be on your best behavior.
Yes, yes, absolutely, best behavior.
Only school board, listen.
Yes, we learned.
And just a couple more things with regard to disruption of the meetings. The act doesn't prohibit the removal of someone if that person is willfully disrupting the meeting, to the extent to which the orderly conduct of the meeting is compromised. So if there is a disruptive influence, that person could be removed. And then finally, the consequences of violating open meetings laws. The final action taken in violation of the Open Public Meetings Act is voidable by a court, but there's only 30 days in which to commence that particular action. So if someone believes that you've done something contrary to the Open Public Meetings Law, they've got 90 days to file a request with the court to have that voided. The court can't void the final action for failure to post properly if it's essentially an internet problem. We tried our best, and the technical specifications just didn't work. One other thing that we should note if a committee member knowingly or intentionally violates or advises a violation of the closed meeting provisions of the Open and Public Meetings Act, they can be guilty of a Class B misdemeanor. So we just, encourage everyone to avoid knowingly or intentionally violating meeting provisions. That's pretty much everything for the training for today. If you've got questions, I'm happy to entertain them. But
My question,
Yes.
Jason, and thank you very much for that very concise presentation, is the extent of notice of the meeting. What does the statute require that the public body, what type of notice must the public body give to comply with the statute?
the notice that needs to be given is we need to have the date, time, and place of the meeting.
No, I know what the
Yeah.
content of the notice is.
Right.
But what notice, what type of notice?
What type of
Publication in the
notice?
newspaper, sending it out on an email, publishing it on a website? This is my question.
Okay, yeah, so we would have the physical posting, so there'd be a physical posting at the location that provides the notice. And then there's also a notice that goes out to, there's essentially a Utah Public Notice website, and we would go ahead and put the notice there as well. And then we would encourage additional types of notice, just to make sure that we make these meetings as accessible to the public as we can.
That's something Michelle takes care of.
Yeah.
Regular basis.
Every time you guys get your reminder email, it goes on the Utah. Within 72
My other
hours.
question is, if the violation of the statute is failure to give appropriate notice, how does one know that the meeting has occurred so that they can file a timely lawsuit?
That's a good question. I believe within 3 days, if I'm just thinking it through, within 3 days of the meeting, there will be a recording of the meeting that will be made available to the public.
If they comply with the statute,
If they comply with the statute, if they don't provide the recording.
or the notice of the meeting,
Right,
how does someone know to file a lawsuit challenging the act of the committee?
I think in that case, we would have multiple violations essentially, but if there's no notice, you would have the 90 days, and if you don't happen to receive anything within those 90 days, my guess is you could get a creative attorney to try to indicate that there's a reason why that time period
There
should
have to
be
be some
told.
exception, some discovery rule of some
Yeah.
sort that would excuse an untimely challenge.
Right.
for
If there is essentially like a clandestine meeting that takes place, and there's no particular way to give notice, I would imagine you could, and this is very much speculation as far as we went through, but I think you could argue, I made my challenge as soon as I knew or reasonably should have known that the meeting took place. There's other instances in which the statutes or limitations and similar things are told in that type of circumstance. So then it would be probably just a battle and argument going back and forth. I would strongly suggest that we provide notice and where.
I'm not suggesting the
Don't
contrary,
run
but
into that.
I'm just curious.
No,
I
I hear
an
you.
example, when I was on the CBCIP, where we voted on things like giving the recommendations to the mayor and city council, we were advised never to do that via email, because if you're actually taking action and then you have to provide a public notice, that's an open meeting, not an email. So we could discuss things on the email, but never take actual action, because then
Physical
we might
action,
be
because then
violating
you
the
would-
Open Meetings Act by not providing notice that we were taking action.
That would make sense. It's fine. I would agree. I don't think we can take any official action without being inside a open public meeting.
But Jason, couldn't we do this? Couldn't we have it comply with the open meeting statute, give the appropriate notice, have a discussion during the meeting that is otherwise open to the public, and pass the motion or resolution during the meeting that says we can vote on this particular matter by email after the meeting? In other words, you have a discussion, but maybe, you want to get everyone's point of view. Some people might not be present, although you have a quorum. And then you say, we're gonna send this resolution out to everybody, and we're gonna collect their decisions by email. Can you do that?
I think it gets dicier. I think in that particular instance, you could at least have a challenge that the vote and the decision itself did not take place in an open public meeting. And as part of that, I don't know how you would determine essentially who voted in which particular way, or how a
Well,
member
you'd have
of the
the
public
email.
would be aware of that,
We
right?
have the email record that would say how some people voted, everyone voted, let's say.
Right. But I'm not certain that that would be easily available to the public. I would worry about a challenge in those circumstances.
Even if the vote was recorded as part of the minutes of the meeting, you know what I'm saying?
I think I would still be
You have to be in
concerned,
person to
because I don't think it would fall under an official action that takes place inside a properly convened open public.
I believe when you adjourn the meeting, you're no longer in the public meeting. If you do have more communication afterwards by electronics, you have to reopen the public meeting.
But what I'm saying is during the public meeting, where the public has an opportunity to participate and is present, if they choose to be, you resolve to have the vote by some electronic means outside or after the meeting. So everybody has noticed that that's gonna happen.
And I understood, but the meeting's adjourned, it's no longer an open meeting.
Yes, and we would never vote in that way, like any,
Curious.
yeah, we would never function or anything like that, I guess.
Another esoteric question that I have is I'm familiar with Robert's rules from the pre-pandemic times.
Right.
So now that we have hybrid and electronic communications, and it's in our, I think our bylaws that we use Robert's rules, I get sketchy about how to do things, I guess, when we have some people online, some people in the room. Is that collected somewhere where I can get a refresher on the rules for how to do it?
That is a good question. I don't know off the top of my head. I think there's so if I'm understanding the question right, is there a resource out there that provides some guidance on how to properly administer a meeting using Robert's Rules of Order when we are in a hybrid format? You don't have everyone present.
I've been defaulting to the way that the rules are for if somebody were teleconferencing it. But I'm not sure, because I haven't seen it in writing anywhere, that that's the appropriate way to do it.
Yeah. It's a good question. I'm not aware of anything. The teleconference sounds like a pretty good stopgap or a pretty good provisional approach. Let me see.
I just asked because, for example, the adopting the minutes, did it by assent, which I don't know if I need to do a roll call vote if not everybody's in the room. Because that could be something, it's one of those buried in the rules where if you don't have everybody in the room, then you have to go. But I'm just speculating.
My guess is there's something out there that's such an integral part of how we operate now. That I would imagine there's some guidance out there, but I'm not aware of it.
Could you look into that for us, Jason?
Yeah, we can take a look and see what we've got there.
Participate in so many different meetings run by different people, and no two people do it the same way. So I want to try to stick to the rules as close as possible.
I've also got a transaction attorneys meeting tomorrow, right? Raise it with everyone else in the group and see if we have something along those lines.
That's the only question I had. Does anybody else have any questions?
Thank you for this.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Enjoy your whatever.
Thank you. This one was.
Oh, nice. All right, we're going to go back to the Thrive in Place study update. My understanding is we do not have Angela Price. We have some.
Yeah, we have,
okay.
Susan
All right.
anymore.
Well then, go ahead and take over.
All right.
I'll pull up your presentation for you here.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Well, hi, everyone. Sorry I couldn't be there in person tonight, but thanks for having me here virtually in this hybrid format. And thanks so much for hosting this format to be able to talk through the Thriving in Place Salt Lake City's anti-displacement strategy. And especially thank you for all of your involvement with this strategy and with this plan from the beginning. I think this is maybe the third or fourth time that we've had the opportunity to present to you all there in the room. So thanks so much. And then, yeah, Angela isn't able to join tonight, but if you all have questions that I am not able to answer, I will, I can write those down and make sure that we get your questions answered as quickly as possible. And I am Susan Lundmark. I am actually in the transportation division, but I was one of the project managers supporting this effort on the study. So I've been working on it since we were drafting the RFP to try to get a consultant on it. So it's been a long time coming, and I'm excited to just go through these slides. Next. So as many of you probably already know from other presentations that we've been able to give earlier, this plan and study came through a community-driven process to document involuntary displacement and understand those pressures, and to develop a plan of action to mitigate involuntary displacement. And it was a collaboration among many parties, but led by Salt Lake City with our consultant teams that were headed up by Community Planning Collaborative and sub-consultants, University of Utah City and Metropolitan Planning Department, and the Urban Displacement Project, which is out of the University of California, Berkeley. Next. Also, as you likely remember, the plan was developed in 2 phases. So phase 1 was listening and learning from January to August of 2022. And phase 2 was to craft collaborative solutions from September 2022 to May 2023. Next slide. We'll dive into phase 1 here just a little bit. Over 2,500 people shared their experiences and perspectives in a variety of formats, with over 2,100 survey respondents, focus groups that had 50 participants, in-depth interviews with 70 people, including unhoused individuals and low-income individuals in subsidized housing, and then student workshops that reached 200 students in elementary, middle school, and high school through 7 youth workshops. Next slide. We also, in that time of phase 1, the Urban Displacement Project was hard at work analyzing and mapping data in the region on displacement. And in particular, they looked at, in order to at least somewhat define displacement, they were looking at census tracts that were losing low-income individuals and households over time. And so this map just shows kind of a snapshot of highlights where lower income renter populations were being lost in the orange and red census tracts areas. And the map showed that the highest displacement and displacement risk were east of the Granary District, kind of in the downtown area, and then south of Central 9th and Ballpark, as well as some spots on the west side as well that are at risk. And for lots more information on this, including the interactive data map, anyone can go to thrivinginplaceslc.org for more information. Next slide. As part of that mapping effort, the Urban Displacement Project was also looking at the severity of the challenge in terms of where do people go if they are involuntarily displaced. And what that mapping effort showed was a bit grim. There are, as you can see, there are green census tracts that have sort of more affordable housing opportunities. The yellow have like medium, less affordable, and then the orange census tracts are just not affordable. You would need a high income to be able to afford to live in those orange census tracts. And then the hash marks are showing where there's displacement or displacement risk. And in this case, all of the sort of quote more affordable census tracts are also areas that are experiencing displacement. And so that means that if a family or an individual is displaced from housing in one of those census tracts, there isn't anywhere that has comparable pricing and renting prices where they can move that isn't also experiencing displacement at the same time. So next slide. So that leads to some of our key takeaways that, as you can tell from that, that displacement pressures in Salt Lake City are high. They're getting worse. Housing prices are still going up. Rents are still going up. Displacement impacts many people in many areas, but around the country and in Salt Lake City, it disproportionately impacts communities of color in a negative way. And there are no affordable neighborhoods to move to when involuntary displacement happens. In addition to that, there's just not enough housing overall, and there's a severe lack of affordable units in Salt Lake City. Next slide. And with all that information come additional challenges, including that there are many people in the city and in the region who see new housing as part of the problem rather than part of the solution, especially when it's luxury housing or high-end market rate housing. It seems like it's going to serve newcomers, not people who already live here and not people with lower incomes. People see city policies and practices being part of the problem, and that there's been a focus on housing production, but not necessarily enough focus on affordable housing and not necessarily on housing preservation and tenant protections. So in addition to that, displacement's happening now, and many of the solutions and fixes and recommendations that are in this plan will take years to achieve a meaningful impact. And just a note on that, none of this is to say that what the city has been doing so far with affordable housing hasn't helped. It has, and the focus on affordable housing that the city and others have had over the past, say, 10 years or so has certainly helped offset some of this, but clearly there are still many challenges and lots of work to be done that's outlined in the plan. Next slide. So what is the plan? A functional aspect of the plan is, and a primary aspect of it is that we need to be pro-tenant and pro-housing at the same time. So be working on housing production and preservation, but also be doing what we can to support our tenants and mitigate their displacement as the city grows and changes. So to do that, the plan talks about helping lower income tenants stay in place, creating more affordable housing opportunities, and partnering with impacted communities and others, like other agency and other partners to do that. Next slide. And I'll try to go through these slides kind of quickly, but there is kind of a lot of information in them, so bear with me. The plan talks about helping lower income tenants stay in place, especially by increasing tenant resources and making it easier for people to access those tenant resources, and providing direct assistance to tenants who are displaced by development. Another aspect of it is to create more affordable housing by incentivizing affordability in new development that's coming online, and also incentivizing preservation or replacement of lost units, acquiring and rehabilitating existing affordable housing, and trying to keep it affordable in perpetuity and invest in which is one of the ways to invest in long-term affordability. And also the city is exploring shared equity housing models right now. In addition, partnering with impacted communities and others means forming ongoing community communication and partnership to meet regularly and talk and be able to coordinate action, and also creating and convening a regional anti-displacement coalition. All of these recommendations are included in the plan and more. But keep in mind, we do have some caveats that there are no magic fixes. If there were, other cities would have done them by now, and we would be able to just implement them. But success has been in other places and will be here incremental. In addition, Utah has quite a few state preemptions in the laws that limit the range of actions for the city. And the city has finite resources and capacity while the scale of the challenge is so big. So our ability to meet that as a city all on our own is somewhat limited. In addition, there's plenty of forces that are outside of the city's control, including just market forces and also areas where state has preemption on certain actions. And then all of this stuff wrapped up in the plan requires many of us, including us at the city and other of our partners, to work differently, which takes time because it requires building new habits and building relationships that are grounded in trust, which sort of by definition takes some time. So all of that are sort of caveats. But yeah, now we can just hop into the action framework, which again, these slides are a little bit dense, but I really encourage people to go to the website if they want to get a good overview or to dig into anything further. But the action framework has 6 sort of overarching goals to 1, protect tenants from displacement, 2, preserve the affordable housing we have, 3, produce more affordable housing, 2, 4, expand funding, 5 is partner and collaborate with others, and 6 is to advocate for tenants at the state level. Next slide. And this is, yeah, the busy slides. This is sort of actually the plan and recommendations in a nutshell on one 11 by 17 piece of paper. But there's so much more detail and information in the plan itself. But what you can see here are the 5 guiding principles, the 6 goals, interrelated goals, and then 22 strategic priorities that are called out under each of those goals. And also, I believe it's 16 near-term action priorities. So like the soonest priorities that we need to get on right away to be able to try to help mitigate displacement to the best of our ability right now. Next slide. And by the way, that action framework is included in the plan and on the website and everything, so you can dig into it a little bit more. Within the plan itself, for each of those strategic priorities, there's at least 2 pages that covers information on the priority, including the purpose, the context, the steps that are going to need to happen to implement it, and then a table that identifies the lead, partners that are needed, a schedule or timeline, and then resources that would have to be committed to it. And then also there's always an opportunity to learn from others and have food for thought in terms of case examples and scenarios for each of those strategies in terms of what other cities and other areas are doing. And then near-term priorities are identified as critical areas of focus as well. Next slide. One of the driving forces actually behind having this plan and study put together at all had to do with the city's housing loss mitigation ordinance, which had been on the books for many years, I think since the 90s or possibly even before. And as we all, the team and everybody dug into that ordinance, there had been the idea that perhaps we would be trying to update it or revise it, but instead it was decided that the ordinance really just needed to be replaced. And so it's being replaced with several several ordinances and several plans of action on the city's part. But it's being replaced with an incentives-based approach to preserving, replacing, and creating affordable housing. It's going to have added focus on helping tenants who are impacted by development and displacement, and making sure that we have better data to inform our actions and know how we're doing. So in terms of supporting impacted tenants, part of replacing housing loss mitigation is having tenant relocation assistance, so direct assistance for tenants who need relocation assistance, and then also developing, drafting, adopting a displaced tenants preference policy so that if and when tenants are displaced by development, they have preference for affordable housing units either within that same neighborhood or somewhere in the city or region close by. And then it also will be working on preserving and creating affordable housing with the community benefits policy and affordable housing incentives, both of which are meant to help incentivize affordable housing in new developments, and then improve data systems in terms of tracking rent and affordability data, which prior to this plan, the city hadn't really been tracking rent and affordability data in the city. We knew how many affordable units were out there and which ones the city and RDA had contributed funding to. But in terms of actually tracking rental data and rent amounts and the affordability of homes, that's something new that's coming online shortly and was included in the mayor's recommended budget for funding. Next slide. So I kind of feel like I talked about some of these already, but in terms of what's happening first and foundational work that's already happening, we're already working on, many people at the city are already working on the drafting of the community benefit policy and what will go in there to make sure that whenever possible, new developments preserve and expand affordable housing opportunities. The mayor had recommended in her budget the tenant relocation assistance program, which will adopt a policy and develop a program to help tenants who are impacted by new development. Affordable housing incentives policy is being worked on right now by Planning Division and others. That's been in the works for some time and gone through some revisions and is still active. And then there's also work being put forward for a displaced tenants preference policy, so that tenants who have been displaced have priority for new affordable units. And then I already talked about the indicators and data systems to make sure that we have reliable information and that we can track our progress. Next slide. There are several other near-term action priorities that the city is working on that are either recommended by the plan or, well, actually they are all in the plan for recommendations, but so some of those are to make accessory dwelling units, ADUs, make them easier and less expensive to build, to invest in community land trusts that have long-term community ownership and affordability options, to use public properties and leverage those land assets for affordable housing in the city, and to acquire and rehab existing affordable housing, preserving that housing and using that as a way to help expand affordability throughout the city. On top of that, we've talked already a little bit about expanded tenant resources and services so that we can meet the high level of need that exists out there, and having a resource center or navigation service to help make it easier for tenants to be able to access those services. And then also looking at and collaborating on shared equity housing options to help tenant become owners themselves or build equity towards their own ownership in the future or wealth building in the future. Next slide. So the plan recommends 3 city action teams, one for tenant support, another for affordable housing development, and a third for anti-displacement policies, and then 2 partnership platforms. So that would be, those city action teams are sort of internal to the city and city staff and leadership to be working on those things. With the partnership platforms, the city would be working with others in the community. So one would be an anti-displacement coalition to partner with regional partners, and then an ongoing community partnership. And so this would be dialogue and trying to build trust with displacement or with neighborhoods that are experiencing high displacement or at risk for high displacement, to try to make sure that the city's solutions and partners' solutions are helping to actually support the need that's out there. Next slide. All of that is sort of summarized in this 2-year action plan, which again is a pretty dense page out of the report, but shows those more immediate action priorities. This table that's difficult to see has the action priority, who is going to lead that priority, what resources would be needed, and then the timing and the timeline for that as well. Next slide. And then, so for community feedback that we got on the plan, when it went through its public comment period, there were about 1,500 unique visitors to the website in May and June, and 29 visitors completed survey forms that showed generally strong support for action, especially for more affordable housing and for tenant support. We also heard as a team that there was a desire to see quantified goals and a way to understand if we're kind of hitting the mark over time. And so a new page was added, page 14, that shows how Housing SLC, which is the city's housing plan, and has many quantified goals, aligns with and is supported by the Thriving in Place strategy. And I'll show you some of that in just a minute. And then there was also an expressed desire to see publicly owned lands used to help create more affordable housing, which is covered in the strategic priority 3D on public land and public ownership, publicly owned lands. So that is captured in there as well. Next slide. So this is that slide that shows how Housing SLC and Thriving in Place kind of speak to each other. They were both running on very similar timelines, and the teams for those were overlapping and sort of intermeshed. So with Housing SLC, which is a 5-year plan, there are targets to assist 10,000 low-income individuals through programs that increase housing stability. And that metric and quantifiable goal is supported by all of these actions, strategic actions that are in Thriving in Place. So 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, 6A, all of those sort of roll into that quantifiable goal. And then Housing SLC has a goal to work towards closing the gap on the 5,500 deeply affordable homes that are needed in the city. And part of closing that gap means creating 10,000 new housing units that would be entitled throughout the city. So 2,000 of those.
If I can interrupt really quickly.
Yes, and sorry, I can't see you guys anymore.
That's all right. I just wanted to get a question in about that because you're using deeply affordable homes and affordable housing. I know that there's HUD specificity to what those are defined by. Could you please give us the definitions of affordable housing versus deeply affordable housing?
Yeah, sure. And I'll tell you what I know is in Housing SLC. I'm not 100% sure if that aligns with like the HUD definitions, but what is in Housing SLC, I believe, and I will double check on this since I was not actively part of drafting that plan. But what I know Housing SLC is looking at is 10,000 new units throughout the city. 2,000 of those would be targeted at 30% area median income and below. So I believe that's typically what would be considered deeply affordable housing. And then another 2,000 of those would be for 31% to 80% area median income. And up to 80% area median income is typically captured in that affordable housing phrase, I guess, if that makes sense. Anything that's like 80% AMI or below. So did that answer your question?
Yes, I know that there's a technical definition to the term, so I just wanted to make sure that it's out there for all of us.
Okay, yeah. Great. Well, and that was where I was going to go next with the 10,000 new units, was to tell you what that breakdown was in terms of those 2,000 units for 0 to 30% and 2,000 units for 31 to 80%. And then the action items below those numbers with the arrows, 2A, 2B, 3A, 3B, 3C, 3D, and even more of them kind of all support and lead into the creation of those units. And then there's also a goal in Housing SLC to help 1,000 low-income households be able to attain affordable home ownership and equity building opportunities, which falls into the Thriving in Place Action Strategy 1E to help tenants become owners over time. Next slide on this. This is community feedback continued. There was also a desire for continued outreach and engagement to not just sort of have this study be the overarching thing and not get back to the community again. And so that is the focus of Strategic Priority 5C, which is on community partnership, and is also part of those partnerships that I talked about in the earlier slide, especially those working directly with communities who are facing displacement pressures. And we also heard a desire for more accessible materials about the plan because it is dense and there's a lot of information. So the consultant team added an overview video to the website that helps kind of navigate the plan and explain how it's laid out and also the content that's in there. And then also developed a graphic overview of the 2-year action plan, which you can see sort of a snapshot of here. And it lets people understand like kind of which things come first, what's happening concurrently, and what happens next over the 2 years for the action plan. Next slide, we might be almost, we're almost to the end. So we really deeply thank everyone who helped create this strategy, including all of those community members and focus group members and youth and everyone who gave their time to give input on kind of the state of where we are with displacement right now, and helping us understand whether our strategies were on target. And then Also, the other thing I wanted to tell you is that the plan received unanimous recommendation, positive recommendation from Planning Commission last week. We are sorry that we weren't able to get on your agenda before Planning Commission, but you are still able to give comment on the plan to City Council when they take it up for their public hearing. And we'd love for you to be able to do that if you can speak out in support of the plan. If you do support the plan and can speak out in support of it, we would, or to be able to provide written comment or something. We'd love for that if that's an option. And that will be transmitted to council in the next probably couple of weeks. But when it gets on their agenda is up to the council office. So I don't have a date for you at this time, but we can keep you updated on that through Michelle. And now I want to stop talking and let you guys ask any other questions that you have. If I don't have the answer right here, Angela was going to be here and she's a wealth of knowledge, but I will take notes and make sure that we get back to you.
Okay, well, first I want to thank you for presenting. That was very detailed. So I'd ask if Michelle, if you could share the slides with us so that we can look at some of the finer print.
It's part of the agenda.
Was it?
When she sent out the notice of the meeting.
If you want a closer look, I won't. Sometimes it's tricky. I can try to zoom in.
But it would be
I
helpful.
only saw it on my phone, so I didn't see the attachment.
It would be helpful, Michelle, if we knew what the timetable was for the city council to approve this plan, so that we could, in advance of that, take a position on it and let at least the city council know what our position is. Because I do think this involves human rights. Really, we're talking about displacing people and having no place to live, and it increases the problem of homelessness in our community, and it also impacts the lack of diversity in our communities by pushing people more to the peripheries than the heart of the city. But my question, and I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name already.
Susan.
Susan, yeah.
My question for you, Susan, is sort of a fundamental question. Where's the money? Like, where's the beef? You know, this is a very expensive program to implement. And the one thing I kept looking for throughout all these various slides is some explanation of how you're going to get the money necessary to implement it. Are you proposing to raise taxes? Are you proposing to create some sort of additional financial incentives for developers? Because one of the reasons we have this problem is that developers do not have adequate incentives to build affordable housing because they can't make money building it, particularly as building costs continue to increase. One of the reasons landlords are evicting tenants is because they can make more money renting the spaces to higher income tenants. So if you want to make affordable housing more available, there's got to be a source of funding to make it happen. And I don't see in this plan where the money's coming.
Yeah, absolutely. And this will be a question that I will want Angela to weigh in on. So I'll give you a partial answer, which I'm sorry might be a little unsatisfying, but then I can try to get you a more complete answer on that. But if I could channel David Driscoll, our lead consultant, you know, he would say it costs an infinite amount of money to do this. You know, you can have almost all the money in the world and it will still be very difficult to provide enough affordable housing for everyone. And so if, you know, given sort of just standard market conditions. So definitely, yes, we are trying to incentivize through development. The city cannot require affordable units to be built as part of new developments, but we can incentivize affordability, especially when especially through like zoning tools when zoning changes are being requested. So that is one area that the city is looking at for trying to get those incentives to be sort of more, more interesting, more enticing to developers. The affordable housing incentives ordinance is also doing that same thing. So allowing people in certain zones, in certain zoning districts, to be able to build and create denser forms of housing, as long as at least a percentage of those is affordable. I believe at 60% AMI in many of the zones. And so that's another place where, so it's not like tangible funding that's going towards it, but it is that incentive and trade-off that the city is trying to help make happen. The redevelopment agency, the RDA, has funding to go towards affordable housing and has been contributing financially towards affordable housing for quite some time. So that funding source is still there. And I think this is a place where Angela would know the numbers off the top of her head, but the state is coming up with more funding to put towards affordable housing over time, and more than they have in the past, to the tune of many millions. And so the city is, working with the state on that and access to funding to be able to put towards housing. But it is very true that this plan does not say it's going to cost this much money and this is where it's going to come from. It's part of the whole process that the plan sort of outlines what the issues are and what we heard from the community and what needs to happen. And now it's on the city and partners and in partnership with commissions like yours to be able to figure out how to move forward and how to implement and where to come up with the funding for that.
So what you're really saying is this plan is really aspirational. It's really a plan that says we would like this to happen, but the procedures for actually making it happen are yet to be determined.
I think that's probably pretty accurate. It's quite visionary, like sort of many of our citywide plans. They typically outline sort of overarching goals and ideas and visions. And then when it comes to actually implementing them in projects, I'm a transportation planner. So like with our transit plans, citywide plans, or other pedestrian bicycle citywide plans, we show networks and connections and things that we want to make happen, but it's like day to day, year after year that we're going after funding to create those and coming up with projects to implement them and actually make them happen. And it's not outlined at that citywide plan level. It happens in like the day-to-day work of staff and leadership in those levels. So I would say that this plan is very similar to that in that way, if that makes sense.
I'll point out that this is the Thriving in Place study. It's now transitioning into being the plan. Right. So it hasn't been adopted as the plan yet. Hey, Pamela, you had a question?
Yeah, so I appreciate all the effort that went into this, and it's clearly, so many people had a lot of involvement. I guess my question is, it started out and it's focused on, preventing displacement, but the strategies are really to mitigate after displacement has occurred, right? So in terms of prioritizing displaced tenants for new housing and, the preference policy and the relocation program and all of that doesn't actually prevent displacement. And I realize that, we're very hampered by the state, the lack of tenant rights and the lack of ability to dictate what developers can do and things like that. But I guess that's a concern I have, is that it's very focused on, and obviously we need lots more affordable housing, but it doesn't really prevent displacement. And so I guess I'm just wondering, in that case, why it's called an anti-displacement strategy, because it doesn't, as I see it, we're not preventing displacement, we're mitigating the effects of displacement. And since we have so many communities, like in that map, that are at high risk of more displacement, what can be done to prevent that? Or is that really not an option because the forces of the market and, the state legislation that prevents us from doing that?
Yeah, that's a really, oh, sorry, did I cut you off?
No.
Oh, that's a really good question and something that we grappled with as a team for sure. I guess it's a little bit of semantics, but our goal sort of from the get-go, I don't think that as much as we would love to prevent displacement, I don't think that we thought that we could completely prevent it from happening. So our goal was to mitigate the negative effects, of gentrification and involuntary displacement to the best of our ability. And what we heard from community is that the number one thing that people need in the short term when they're renters, when they're low income, is they need money to be able to, they have to go somewhere. And so that is something that we really tried to support right out the gate. And so that and the tenant preference policy is sort of wrapped up in those more kind of almost nearer term, like most immediate impact, and helping people who are vulnerable or at risk of homelessness or having to, double up, triple up, live in cars, live on couches, that kind of stuff. So that's where kind of that action item comes from. But to get to your question about can we really prevent it, which I am not an expert, I'm not going to speak to it as if I were an expert, but I think what more experts would say is that comes in the longer term goals. So building equity for people, helping people become owners or have other ways of building wealth, to be able to live in a city that is sort of, subject to market forces, and to be able to stay. And then also doing things like acquiring and rehabbing and trying to keep properties in perpetuity that can be affordable for the very long term, as well as community land trusts that really put ownership into the community and community members who live there, and the shared equity and shared ownership models. Those are the strategies that are longer term. They're complicated. I don't know all of the ins and outs of them, but those are the parts of the document and the strategy that we hope, over the long term will help move the needle on the actual anti-displacement and preventing displacement to the best of, our ability, mitigating it to the best of our ability, I'd say.
Okay, so throw one more curveball at you.
Okay.
The emphasis on density is a good short-term fix to shortage in housing, the desire to try to keep affordable housing in the city. However, it's almost exclusively apartments and condos. We're losing single-family households. So people who have children or people who plan on having children are being pushed out of the city. So out of those 10,000 units, is there any carve out for families, or is this just about trying to get density so that we can keep up with gentrification?
That's a great question. And I'll have to get back to you on how Housing SLC addresses that question in particular. But I do know that the RDA, which has quite a bit of funding, that's city funding that can be used towards affordable housing, that the RDA board has set, I think this year and last year, as a goal for family housing to be a priority in the in allocating those funds. And so funding that the RDA has, they expect it to go towards family housing and or deeply affordable housing. And there's definitely, I would say, from what I used to work for the RDA before I worked for the transportation division. And so I would say that definitely in the last few years, just anecdotally, it seems like there's a much bigger push on that side and on the city side as a whole to recognize that we need to try to keep our families and our children in the city, and to do what we can to make sure that there's family housing available to them. So yeah, that's where I know at least the RDA has that, and then I can check into the Housing SLC question and how that's tackled in terms of family housing.
Okay, so currently it's not part of the Thriving in Place study. It's something the RDA is doing separate from this initiative?
Well, the Thriving in Place study, that's a really good question. I don't know that Thriving in Place really calls out family housing in particular, but it does talk about, trying to help families stay in the city. And then the RDA funding is put towards that. along with other sources of city funding, and that family housing that gets city funding is prioritized in that process.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
I think David has another question.
I will share their contacts and you all can, just for the sake of time. Okay, thank you, Susan.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I will get back to you on sort of more, I can also send to Michelle more detailed information on those questions. Thank you all for your thoughtful questions as well.
Yes, thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too.
Sorry about that. I wasn't even looking at the time.
Yeah, I am.
Okay. So
Commissioner Stoll is in the room.
Welcome. Okay, that takes us to item 6 on the agenda. We might be able to pull this in at under 20 minutes. We just decided to expand it a little bit because we spent about an hour talking about it just with the 4 of us a few days ago. So, Michelle, do you want to give us an info dump?
So some of the changes we're currently discussing are the names of the awards. So for new commissioners, or if you didn't attend Human Rights Day last year, the original names of the awards were very just simple. So I think it was Emerging Leader, Individual Award, which Emerging Leader went to a youth under 18, and then our Individual Award went for anybody else that made an impact on human rights in the last year. And then we had our Community Organization Award, and I believe on the award itself, it said Community Organization. So my office and the intern I had, Mia, she's no longer with us, we thought of a bunch of different names, but I wanted to bring just 3 ideas, or 1 idea for each, and if you have any suggestions, just let me know. So for the Emerging Leader Award, it would be, the new title would be Emerging Leader for Human Rights Award. For the Individual Award, it will be Inspirational Advocate for Human Rights Award. That one, not really too set on, so if you have any
What about
suggestions,
inspirational youth advocate?
That's
no, it's for this is for like the adult award.
the adult award.
That's why I'm trying to not get anyone confused and myself included. So the Emerging Leader or the youth under 18 would be Emerging Leader for Human Rights Award. That individual or quote unquote adult Inspirational Advocate for Human Rights Award, and the community organization would be Community Partner for Human Rights Award. So I can send this out in a follow-up email, but
I
just kind of
think it's a good idea to use the human rights.
Yeah.
For human rights.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was very, I think it said Individual Award, which it's like, yeah, it said Human Rights Day on it, but how can we get more people excited about these awards?
And this is coming up in December, isn't it?
Yes.
So the nomination process needs to start pretty soon.
We're gonna get it open. That's why I need kind of, if you have any suggestions, let me know. But if you are okay with it, it's nothing we have to vote on. It's just something to look into.
Yeah, the idea was there might be better wordsmiths.
Just
on here,
community
because we
partner
just
for
did this for
human
years.
rights.
And what was it before?
I think it was like
Our
Community
titles, right?
Organization Award.
Yeah.
So we're just adding for human rights, so basically.
What was the title for the award for the person under 18?
Emerging Leader.
Emerging Leader Award, it was just that.
Emerging leader.
But now I'm saying maybe we should add Emerging Leader for Human Rights, like more specific. All of them would have that same ending.
Well, my only suggestion off the top of my head is we say emerging youth leader for human rights. And then for the adult, we just say maybe individual community leader for human rights or something to that extent.
I personally don't like adding in the part of it. I think that sets it apart. Yeah, like I don't know.
Consolation prize for
Yeah, a little bit, but I do like the emergence since that's something we have.
And there is an additional piece. So with the Emerging Leader in the past, it has recognized someone under the age of 18. However, what we were discussing in our chair and vice chair meeting is, should we consider Emerging Leader like goes longer than 18. Like I feel like I'm still an emerging leader and I'm in my early 20s. So it's like, how can we encompass those maybe still in college that are still emerging leader, and with us wanting to adopt 2 awards per category, which we discussed in an earlier meeting. My idea was to have one recognized for under 18 and one between that 18 and 25. If we wanna make it past 25, just let me know what you all think is an emerging leader, but we're trying to see where we can meet both ends.
Yeah, that was our compromise discussion. So first it was expanding the age range, and I thought that if we were to expand the age range, then that would pretty much rule out people under 18, because you have a lot more experience between 18 and 24, a lot more opportunity to get involved between 18 and 24 than you do under 18. So the compromise was that we reserve one for under 18, and then we have one that floats a little bit older. But decided we wanted to bring it up with all of you guys because.
And the other thing you could include in your emerging leader is I think about like from our newcomers, you know, refugee, new American communities. Those folks may not fall within 25 and under, but obviously don't have as much time here. And we might want to recognize somebody from who's new to the community in that regard. And so they're emerging in the sense that they're developing leadership, providing leadership within their new community. And I don't know if that we would also want to include that in that.
I think it's.
You sound like Commissioner Stoll there.
No, that is a good suggestion. That's why I'm just emerging leader. When I think of it, I don't just think of youth. So while the argument was it's gonna put people under 18 years of age at a disadvantage, I didn't see it in that way, only because the individual award, it would be the same thing. So anyone over 18, someone who's in their 40s, 50s, 60s has all this experience. How can someone who's 19 still get that award?
Making a decision based on the name is where it got problematic, because the intent of that award was to go to somebody, a youth. So if we are changing the criteria based on the name emerging leader, it's based upon the name, not on what the intent of the award was.
But although I heard Michelle say that you might have 2, so that one would be reserved for 18 and under, and then one you would expand the age.
Whatever you all think.
Okay.
When we discussed this last year, me and my predecessor, the idea was to just recognize just emerging leaders, whatever that looks like. Because sometimes emerging leader does not have an age, and that's kind of the point we were getting at. But will we be putting youth at a disadvantage?
I remember that's significantly different, that we established the category specifically to recognize a youth.
I mean, I like the idea of reserving one for youth, because somebody said the other, maybe somebody.
So do we think, are we thinking one with an age limit of 18 and under reserved, and then just an open for another secondary emerging leader? Is that what I'm hearing?
Do you ever have a hard time finding applicants under 18?
We barely established the category, I think 2 years ago.
Personally, I didn't like having
Maybe
categories recognizing young people.
Yeah, just young people.
But I think emerging leaders are people that have not yet been recognized as such, or are working to accomplish something. And I think the other categories are for people that have actually accomplished something.
That's the
Rather than base it on age. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, you could be an emerging leader in your 60s.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Like, again, we're focusing on the words emerging leader as opposed to the intent of expanding the awards. Because originally, I think we had an individual and an organization. We expanded to add a youth category, and we called it emerging leader, so that we could have recognizing somebody who's not already established, been working in the field for 10, 15, 20 years. So the intent was for youth, but if we want to change that intent, that's fine too. But I just wanted to get away from the words emerging leader. That's just what we call the one that was designated for somebody under 18. So we would be abandoning the idea of having a award set aside for somebody under 18 in favor of recognizing somebody who's new to the realm of whatever we're doing, contributing to human rights. So that's just what I wanted to put out there, was that we felt the need to have a carve out for somebody under 18 for a reason, and I'm repeating myself, so.
And you all are the voting body, so at the end of the day, you still review an application, and someone who, I don't think the application is the end all be all, because we saw some great applications for the individual award, and you didn't even know their age until we met that individual, and we're like, wow, they're like still in college and had this. So I don't think age will limit, depending if you all are voting on the sense of how are they impacting human rights and how they answer the question, which goes into, I also want to develop more criteria. The criteria last year, we don't necessarily have to think of rubrics, but how can we examine our own biases? I don't have this vote, you all do. And in the past, I think the mayor may have chosen, but Mayor Mendenhall does not. She leaves it up to you all to do this. So just how can we help that process be a little more smoother for those who are here? So I think, David, you were here, and of course, Jason, you were here last year, and Esther, for that voting piece.
I would recommend that we do some kind of like ranked choice voting, because it tends to ranked choice voting.
Okay.
I think that would be the best way for us to because most of the nominations come from people on this committee, and everybody votes for the person they nominated. So the person who eventually gets the award is the one who can scrounge up two.
So what is that nominating process? Like how, you said that you're saying that they mostly come from this committee. Do we do outreach to try to get nominations from the wider community?
So it gets put up on the website. We're supposed to reach out to our networks, social media, trying to get people to submit nominations. But I would say that in all the years, now I guess I've done this 7 times, I don't think we've ever had more than between half a dozen and a dozen nominations.
So the troubleshoot there, I think, by having more things about these awards will help entice people. Because if I wasn't in this role, I did not even know this existed for Salt Lake City. So yes, our marketing, but also like, okay, what does this award entail? Because it was very, very short. Emerging leader, under 18. Individual award, over 18, and then community organization, Salt Lake City based, that all advance human rights. Just that simple. And it can be that simple, but I'm just saying, when I see professional organizations do awards, it's more detailed than that.
Well, and I think that relates into the criteria of how we decide them, right? If we have specific descriptions of what people should be not, like what's an appropriate nominee, what kinds of things to be done, what are the criteria for nomination, and we can use those same criteria for voting on who we select as well.
So yes, Mia, like my intern, she did do research on that. So I can email everyone with that information if you all want to review and see if that criteria is fair, but we're gonna have to, it may have a rush on the email because I hope to get this up on the website for nomination.
I think we should take this conversation online with the caveat knowing that it's open to public records requests, so let's continue.
Like a continued meeting?
It's not a continued meeting, but if we do take this, because it will be a majority of the committee communicating by email, it becomes subject to open records. So let's just point that out, that let's take the conversation online through email, reminding everybody that could be subject to a public records request. So let's keep that.
I can follow up, but I think because this is just an event planning more so, I think it'll be fine. Because
I think if
we're not taking any policy action.
Well, we're going to be discussing adopting new rules with a majority of the members of the commission.
But it's not an ordinance thing. I can follow up.
All right.
It's very like we're just planning an event. So we do this with Welcoming Week. We don't have to get records, but I can make sure. Because
I'm more concerned about is getting input from a variety of community partners for nominations. I think we really need to figure out a way to publicize these awards more than just putting it on our website.
Yeah, last year we reached out to every single part. We have a in-depth list. That was the first year back since COVID. So that was a good turnout, I would say. That was 100 people.
In the two emerging.
I'm not talking about reaching out for people who are going to attend the event.
The nominations.
Reaching out for people to nominate.
We did reach out.
We were emailing every single week. as much as we could.
And we did, the two young women who got the Emerging Leaders Award were came highly recommended from multiple sources. So I mean, they were basically a shoe-in when we voted for them. If you recall, the one from West High and
Young student at the university.
Yes,
Right.
and that was community recommendations, both of them. So that was good.
we just need to step up that a little bit.
Yes.
Yes.
By reaching out to the partners.
Which there's a game plan in place for that, but I
We
just.
can reach out to the university, we can reach out to nonprofits that serve a variety of people in the community. We should do the outreach.
Yeah, I think we had a list of about 50 organizations that we asked, and we didn't get very much feedback. So we just have to keep that, I think. All right, anyway, I think we're getting close to time on this subject. You want to give us the info dump on time, location, date?
Oh, yes. Okay, the Gallivan Center, it's now Saturday, December 2nd. I believe I may have said it was December 9th, but the Gallivan got reserved before we got ours in. So we're now putting it for the 1st December.
December 7th?
Second.
Oh, it is the second. not the
Second, that first Saturday in December.
Okay.
From 12 to 2 will be a lunch period. We're hoping that will probably increase turnout, hopefully if it's in the day versus in the evening.
In the evening, yeah.
People can bring their families and
that's a Saturday?
That's a Saturday, December 2nd, at the Gallivan Center. And I will provide more information to come. And then just a reminder about the retreat, that's on August 26th. We will not be discussing business there, so this is your first reminder, and I'll remind you all in email. It will just be informal, casual, and we'll be meeting with past HRC members to ensure that Sorensen Unity Center, and more information will come on that via email. Meals will be provided.
Sorry, what time's that gonna start?
The retreat?
Yeah.
10 to 1. And if you can't stay the whole time, that's okay, but we will provide continental breakfast and lunch. What was that?
What about an agenda?
For the retreat?
For the retreat, yes.
It will come. I just had one retreat and now I have this meeting, so give me some grace, it will come.
We're inviting several people who've been involved in
Yes, I need to.
the commission in the past, so hopefully we'll be able to do kind of history of the Human Rights Commission in Salt Lake City to get past successes, past failures, and yeah, that way I feel more comfortable when I'm on my way out in December, that you guys have some idea in what direction you want to take things in.
Yes.
Where are we? So, well, covered the whole retreat update under 5 minutes.
Yeah, that was basically it. I kind of tied it in.
Okay, we're good on time then. So, subcommittee goals and priorities. Racial Equity and Policing Commission, we just had the retreat this last weekend. Not really much of an update. I don't think there was anything really new because we couldn't do anything substantive at the retreat. Just kind of getting to know each other in person. The old guard, the people who have been part of the core group from the beginning, are all going to be gone by the end of this year. So it's kind of a huge turnover happening there as well. Asked that they provide a comprehensive list of the goals they've succeeded and what's still left outstanding from the original mission plan, so we can try to get that across the finish line as well. And what else am I missing, Michelle?
They'll just have their general meeting next week. For the other subcommittees, I would say there's no other formal updates because we have subcommittee meetings next week. If you wanted to touch base on your idea about gentrification.
All right. So homelessness, Salt Lake Valley Commission did homelessness meeting. There's still a big push on the funding. Full court press trying to get the legislature involved. Wayne Niederhauser has been very active in the while the legislature is not in session, they're hoping to get an increase in the funding. I believe the city is about to announce their partnership between the various municipalities on what the winter overflow plan is. I don't think that's been publicly announced yet, but it's going to be happening very soon. So that is one more thing off the table, get it done early so that we're not up against the wall as the cold weather comes. So that's a good improvement in things. So gentrification. This one is the subcommittee that has had the least amount of, I guess, interest from this body, but as we saw with that Thriving in Place study, that does get adopted by the city council and becomes part of the plan. I would see if Mayor Mendenhall has a second term, most of the policies about housing coming out of the city council and the mayor's office are going to revolve around this study that we just saw a presentation for. So even if we don't have a standing subcommittee, I think we should have a point person, or you guys, because I won't be here next year, should have a point person on gentrification. So there's a stakeholder at the table while all these policies are being discussed. Currently, it's Will, but my understanding is he transition to a different committee. So I would recommend that when you guys do a election in December or January, whatever, that you don't let the gentrification subcommittee lapse, that you find somebody to be the point person on that topic. So that's my sales pitch. Keep it going.
Are we gonna, so at the retreat, will we talk about sort of the subcommittees and priorities and things like that?
Yeah, we can review them, we just can't have any, like action items.
Okay.
So we can just, that's exactly what we're gonna try to overview.
Okay.
So we're trying to get those key, players who have been in the Human Rights Commission before to provide that insight.
Yeah, just because one observation we have is like, so we have 9 people, theoretically, there's 9 slots on this commission. There are
Yes.
6 subcommittees. That's an awful lot of subcommittees for such a small commission, because you're basically, everyone has to be on more than one, and most people don't have the time for that.
No, trust me,
Yeah.
I'm constantly planning
It
between
might,
subcommittees
like-
here and.
I mean, you know, maybe that's something we can look at is it's reducing the number so that people have more energy to put towards them.
We're required by ordinance to have representation on the Racial Equity Policing Commission and the CDOT Commission, or the CDOT working group. So those 2 are set in stone, but the other 4 are ones that came about from interest in this body.
But I agree with the panelists.
Yeah.
Saying we might want to consolidate some of these, look at one committee has multiple purposes.
Yeah, homelessness and gentrification would go together.
They kind of go together. Also youth.
I mean,
Children
also
and
because
youth.
you can, for example, you know, one of the reasons I was interested in joining was because of my, you know, interest and experience and expertise in refugees and new Americans. You know, we could have a subcommittee, or we can, like you're saying, have a point person, but we sort of bring those issues to the substance of the meeting rather than always. One way is to that.
We'll discuss it at the retreat. That's the kind of stuff.
So
we
that's,
need to do.
I didn't know if we could talk about that at the retreat. Like,
Yeah, we
what
can
the
talk about
rules
like a
are.
restructure.
We just can't make decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the reason why this structure came about was that for about 2 years, everything just got done by the chair and vice chair.
Right.
Nobody participated in anything else, so we decided to establish subcommittees to try and generate enthusiasm and people taking lead on issues they were passionate about. And now we're in transition again, so we can talk about that at the retreat. While I'm thinking about it, children and youth advocacy. If you remember our presentation back in June where we had the Utah Children, blank on the name of the organization.
Yeah, Voices for Youth.
Voices for
Utah Children.
So since then, I have had conversations with the mayor and 2 of the school board members floating the idea that when these school closures take place, that they can take into consideration that property being turned into pre-K and early childhood daycare.
Daycare,
So
preschool.
something like preschool, I guess it would be. We're talking about like early childhood care. Or,
Well, remember, one of the main points of the presentation was the absence of affordable childcare.
So I've mentioned that with the mayor, I've mentioned that with Nate Salazar and Bryce.
Well, space is one component. finding workers, childcare workers and compensating them is another big component.
Understood. I'm just saying, I put the idea out there, talking with them about it, because they're going to start having some Salt Lake School District property opening up. So the idea is percolating. We just have to, through our own networks, keep promoting that, and hopefully that will be one of the things that are considered what to do with.
Unfortunately, they're closing the schools because there's an absence of young people in those districts, which include newborns. It's just parents and families are just not having kids in those districts, which is why the schools are closing.
Let's discuss for 6 months down the road, and they start picking the schools to close.
All related. It's all related.
Yeah.
I just want to, announce, since we're getting close to the end, I will not be available for the meeting on September.
Oh,
Okay.
All right.
I'm going to be out of the country on that day.
All right, so you won't even be able to be virtual?
I won't even be able to.
Okay, we're probably gonna be finalizing some things for Human Rights Day at that meeting, so let's make sure that we get you updated.
By email if I can, but I'm going to be in Europe, and so the time difference is significant.
I was just there, so yeah, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Understood, because if you've got any questions, comments, or concerns that you want to be addressed there, make sure it's to us by email before the meeting.
I know how to do that.
All right, does anybody have anything they wish to add? I think we're.
Esther. Can you
Yes,
hear me?
Esther. Yes.
Hi, everyone. I'd put my video on, but I'm not looking so hot right now. No, I'm just kidding. I just wanted to welcome the new members to the board, and I know I haven't had a chance to meet you in person, but I just want to say hello, welcome to the board, and we look forward to working with you all to impact the different things that we have in the city going on. So I look forward to meeting you all in person soon. And thank you for those that came presented. That's a lot of good information, and I enjoyed the questions that you all had to share. That's it. I just wanted to say hello.
Thank you, Esther. Also, Pamela made exactly the same points that you made about the emerging leaders category. Don't know if you heard that.
What did you say? Sorry, say that one more time.
I said Pamela was making the same points that you made on the emerging leaders category. So you guys are what's the word?
That's perfect.
Thank you, Pam. So usually we didn't have discussion and dialogue about human rights. We haven't done that the last couple of meetings simply because of time constraints. So we probably had a few things that have piled up. If anybody has something they want to bring up. Anyone? Point out that I've been following Israel pretty closely, and it's been, it's a two-sided coin in that we still see the government pushing through their judicial reforms that erode democracy, but you also see something like over 15 to 20% of the population demonstrating against it on a weekly basis. I mean, could you imagine if we had a social movement in the United States where 1 in 5 people in the country participated? So that's one. Another one I noticed, 2 more coups in Central Africa in the last 3 months.
Niger was a huge problem in Sudan as well.
Central African Republic is basically a satellite of Russia. So we're seeing democracy being eroded around the world. You guys can participate if you have anything human rights related that you want to get on the record or make a emotional comment about.
I think there are some serious concerns of things that are happening at the southern U.S. border. And particularly, I mean, the Biden administration is expediting removals for certain families based on criteria that they're not eligible to apply for asylum. So it's that, we keep on reading that the arrivals at the border are going down, but
they're still very high, and there's still a lot of people who are not getting a chance to apply for asylum, and that's really a huge concern.
Now, didn't they change all the criteria for when and how you can apply for asylum? And they're trying to create these centers in other countries where people can apply for asylum and fill out their paperwork there, but there are huge logistical problems with people accessing those sites.
Yes, for sure, they are. I mean, they're also trying to speed up the process even for folks that come over the border as well. But they're also, so they are putting in some improvements, but they're also expediting some of the removals as well. So it's, you know, there's some, it's a mixed bag for sure. It's totally a mixed bag.
Believe when I was at State Department, the consular affairs said that if you were to go through the whole process in Mexico City trying to apply proper way, it would be from beginning to end at least 6 years.
Yeah, I mean,
probably more like 10.
You know, that's part of the issue is that people apply for asylum and it's just a really lengthy process. I mean, one good thing is that they have approved, and you know, the organization I'm working for is doing this, is more support for the Cuban and Haitians that have come in. They actually receive services and apply for employment authorization and those kinds of things, because in some communities they have huge amounts of Cuban and Haitian entrants that have come in. So it's just like take Jersey, New Jersey, and they have, you know, so many Haitians and so many Cubans. That's one thing they have opened up services for those folks, so that's the thing.
Governor
It's
Abbott.
a little bit off topic, but I just recently saw a movie that was a piece by John. Oh, it's really good movie. It's on Amazon Prime, and it's about Syrian refugees that resettle in Antigonish, Nova Scotia, Canada, and it's really horrible. It's a very interesting story, but it really portrays the struggles that a lot of immigrants have. And succeed, and it's a success story, actually. Anyway.
On the border crisis, I believe that Governor Abbott's unilateral directives are going to end up in the Supreme Court just because it's overstepping federal authority.
Oh, it's got to go to the Supreme Court.
But it also seems to be intentionally cruel. So
yeah,
we'll see how. So we'll see what it needs to happen quickly to get the bill before the Supreme Court. Anyway, anybody have another one? Any other topics?
The move we adjourn.
All right. Well, last one I had was Ukraine grain shipments being basically Russia trying to cut off grain shipments to the world. I mean, that's
although I
global
also read that some of the countries in Africa are turning Putin down on his offer that he would ship them the grain. And I don't know why, but it might have to do with the conditions he's imposing on the receipt of the grain.
He just tried to have a African summit where invited a bunch of countries together, and like, participation was almost nil. So I guess when you threaten to starve the entire world, it's depending on that grain, they really don't like you. Mm-hmm. That's something that we're going to see this winter. Is we can expect famine in the developing world around the globe because of how much of the world depends on Eastern and Central European grain shipments that are not going to be going through the Black Sea anymore. So, anyway. Now I'll entertain a motion to adjourn on that happy note. You should have ended on your film. Sorry. So is there a second to adjourn? I'll second. All right, all in favor of adjourning? All right. All right. I'm going to assume that